So, yet again, I was having a wee perusal of a vid that Resisting the Lies had put up with the title Tourist Levy, aka Tourist Tax, in brackets, which also affects locals indirectly. I would say indirectly. Big style. It's the only part I would really disagree with. And by the way, if you hear snoring, well, Bella is, having a wee nap. But, and they've already pulled this in places, as far as I'm aware, in Edinburgh. There's now a tourist tax on top of, let's face it, not the cheapest of cities, which I would say is not a good idea even there, because, you see, with this change of our uninvited guests, there's an awful lot of people who, well, feel less safe, genuinely. I mean, look, be under no illusion. When it came to Edinburgh property prices, there were certain areas that were always, much more expensive than other aspects of Edinburgh. But, I used to discuss it years ago, the London bounce. Edinburgh, at the time, we are talking 10, 15 years ago, from memory, it had something like the highest concentration of libraries in a city. It had highest concentration of restaurants and various other things outside of London. And, well, let's face it, there's no argument about, at least in part, some of the fine architecture that exists to this day, although there are elements of Edinburgh that I would argue have been completely destroyed with that usual modernist, soulless nonsense of which you see in so many cities. And remember, Edinburgh was described as the Athens of the North a long time ago, and still seen as a place of learning and various other things, but I can already see the destruction happening in Edinburgh. I've noticed, and I've said occasionally in a vid, the amount of graffiti, and if you looked at the roads, seriously, meanwhile they're focused on, is your car compliant, like so many other cities that are rolling out these ULE zones, etc., and ultimately forcing people to get rid of perfectly serviceable vehicles that have been low maintenance, low cost, low to insure, etc., etc. Doesn't pass what we've decided, blah, blah, blah. And of course, that's had really bad effects in Glasgow. And of course, as they're inviting all these, well, uninvited guests to join us in Scotland, and we don't have the money for it. We certainly don't. They are, and it's inarguable. I've covered it in the recent past. They've got apparently the highest concentration of asylum seekers of any city in the UK. Can you get your head around that? Seriously, had the highest proportion of asylum seekers in Scotland and the highest number of any city in the UK, and they're now saying, the SNP over there, that we need to send them to Edinburgh. Think about this, yeah. What do you think's going to start happening to Edinburgh property prices? After all, once the shine is taken off, because, well, we're all in this together, and you may have a doubt about your safety that you'd never considered in your life before, and generally things are getting worse, but we've to think of others, but not ourselves. And this tourist levy that we're now talking about it elsewhere in other places in Scotland, and it's for the best. Under fair use, let me play some of this.
Tourist taxes has sharply divided opinion since councils were given powers to introduce them.
But remember, all that terminology, given powers. I've always said, they're wall with the cultists. Councils, what goes for local government, civil service, the education system, law, you name it, the police, blah, blah, blah. You have a society within a society in every aspect of life, and they have a very different belief system than you and I. And to our detriments. No two doubts about it. I mean, all you need to do is ask yourself the question, if you were to tell a bunch of people to destroy a country from within, how would you go about doing it? Well, yeah, absolutely, and so much more, seriously. But let's carry on.
In Galloway has become the latest area to consider imposing such charges. I mean, literally, they're saying to independent businesses, by and large, you only exist as long as you're paying us, bitch. On top of the various costs associated with, existing. But will it bring a welcome cash boost to the region, or will it end up turning people away towards cheaper options elsewhere in Cumbria or the borders? Greg,
don't kid yourself. It'll kick in the borders, Cumbria. Remember, this is the rollout of Agenda 21. The deindustrialization of the West, the destruction of the West to create a homogenized, global, despotic dictatorship under the guise of a technocracy. Yeah. Ultimately, it's ball deep in the occult. We're no longer needed. And look, everything intellectually about us, historically, that has made us so successful as nations, they're wanting to eradicate and utterly shred and destroy. But while masquerading as the righteous, they keep applying more pressure on the existence of independent businesses.
Or examines the issue.
Its beautiful landscapes made tourism big business in Dumfries and Galloway. So should the local council get an extra slice of the money coming in?
By the way, even that, I mean, it's utter lies. When you look at so many places around Scotland alone, which used to be tourist hotspots, they've been struggling for decades. It's just got progressively worse. And while, shall we say, many sort of semi-retired and could afford to take certain amounts on the chin and open, I don't know, craft shops and, blah, 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 very specific things. And they can still exist. And therefore, the property prices in many of these areas is, still reasonably buoyant. But ultimately, it collapses because all the locals can no longer afford to live there, by and large. And even these useful idiot underling occultists, well, if nobody's coming into their shops, even they'll, but decent pension plans, a few other things. We are dealing with an occult religion here.
It's opening a consultation into whether to charge tourists an extra fee on overnight stays.
Consultation, translation, the use of the Delphi technique to give the illusion to the public they had some say in an already decided outcome.
I think it's a bit of a hasty decision, and I think this comes from,
And the trouble is, there's no side that's not controlled. So, for example, Director of Scottish Hospitality Group. I've no idea who the individual is, but when you look historically, when things are rolled out and all the rest of it, you're perceived, they're on our side. But it still comes back to the funny handshake and, the pinky ring and a few other things. Absolutely. Same with unions.
Hollywood, where they've allowed local councils to do this if they want to. I think it is a tax, basically. And it's not just a tourist tax, it's a tax on locals as well, because everybody's going to have to pay it no matter where you're from. And I think really, in reality, it's to fill a budget shortfall.
Stephen Monk.
Yeah, there's where the lie comes in about the budget shortfall. Because they've always had a budget shortfall. Remember, they do more and offer more to other people from nations, who... And remember, the most obvious thing in the world is, why are these lunatics from left, right and centre supposedly running away from wars and all the rest of it? They don't take their mother, their wives, their children, all the rest of it, blah, blah, blah. They're back in the country of origin. And, they're sending money back. They're even travelling back. Yeah? Africa is 125 times the size of the whole of the UK. 125 times. Why would we be putting more and more pressure,
on budgetary aspects, and yet more and more taxation on the individual, while at the same time demonising them for having a concern for what's going on. I mean, look, as always, I could be doing a better job, but I'm also acutely aware that any words that you say, well, somebody deemed that slightly hurty or whatever, and, you know, no genuine due process, trial, no, none of that.
Montgomery runs Our Place, a restaurant in Annan. He's also director of the Scottish Hospitality Group.
Bringing in a TVL or a tourist levy could push a lot of people over, the VAT threshold, for example. Not a lot of people know that could happen for small B&B owners, small, medium-sized businesses.
Yeah, but remember, if you own nothing and you better be happy, that agenda, well, I mean, it's all going to plan. Now, whether these guys, Lee actually sounds like he cares about local businesses. Maybe he does to a certain extent. Maybe he's not clued up. But really, I'm sure he's shaking enough hands to have a bit better of a discussion, but, they all play their parts. Seriously.
I think for Dumfries and Galloway especially, where we're trying to get people to turn left as they come to Gretna instead of finding Scotland starts at Glasgow or Edinburgh, it's going to be very, very difficult now.
The Scottish Parliament passed a law last year allowing councils to charge an extra fee on overnight stays, known as a visitor levy. So far, 3 areas.
I mean, it's basically saying, listen, we don't want you. Really, seriously. You're an issue. Yeah. And if some people could say to me, but Scott, look at certain popular rural, for example, whatever it's important that people go and run to. Oh, there's a lot more footfall there. It's having an effect on, whatever it is. Never forget that only a few decades ago, most people in the UK holidayed in the UK. Can you imagine how busy all those places used to be in the past? And if you have a doubt in that, I'll do another vid about, for example, a place I know, Argyll. And I just look even recently, and I'm just looking at all those places, and they're temporarily shut or, not in business. And I'm thinking of some of the most stunning scenery in Europe, at the very least, and they're struggling, or places no longer exist. Popular hotels, pubs, middle of nowhere, but could always exist happily because of footfall, etc., etc. And I mean, it's a complex subject, but let's carry on.
All of them cities have is vital to our regions of Cumbria or the Scottish borders. They're concerned they could miss out.
Gretna Green's is a unique place. We're on the border of Scotland and England, and that can cause some issues and some risk if a possible tax did come in, because therefore you have customers coming from the south that will probably stop in Cumbria where there'd be no tax, and then they come into Dumfries and Galloway and find an extra tax of 3, 4, 5%, whatever that figure's going to be. So that might be an inhibitant to them staying, which would be very disappointing.
The council will consider the results of the consultation.
It's in the back. It's in the back. Now, I've no idea who these people are. Right, so it's SNP South, and then there's some other guy. Who's he? Scottish Conservative. Remember, they're supposed to be opposed to each other, right? Now, notice the familiar stutter with and remember, their income is based on being good actors. None of what they're pushing on others, right, are actually they're going to be affected by in any way other than the voting base. And remember, as long as they've got the same ratio of the 10%ers within their area, there's a good chance they'll still get in no matter what they do. For re-election. Anyway, let's carry on.
People would support or oppose. For me, at the moment, I'm interested in finding out what it would mean in terms of facts, figures. If there was.
So this is a typical Masonic trick, which is, look, I'm not for or against it. I just have to need to see the data, and I'll make my decision based on that. But it'll still be, Well, I was convinced at some stage, and yeah, I can see the bigger, honestly.
Was a levy, a visitor levy introduced into Fries and Galloway, would that benefit tourism, benefit infrastructure? Would it support investment in...
I mean, well, remember, they're saying, look, we want to charge people more through you. Bitch. I'm talking about us, or for example, the independent businesses. Yeah. We want to charge you more to be able to do business in an already struggling economy. And she comes out with
what it would mean in terms of facts, figures. If there was a levy, a visitor levy introduced into Fries and Galloway, would that benefit tourism, benefit infrastructure?
how would it benefit tourism or benefit infrastructure? Oh, so basically the inference is, of course, all that will absolutely go to, well, making the towns so much prettier, things painted, roads working, blah, 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 infrastructure. That does it ever happen? No, it never happens. And it goes towards funding agendas. That's it, while destroying more and more independent businesses.
Would it support investment into further tourism? So
investment in further tourism. Look around you. The best ambassadors, by and large, in any country, tourism-wise, all the rest of it, it's ultimately whoever's on a platform like YouTube or whatever. It's certainly not the tourist boards, etc. Yeah, they're more focused on LGBT, X, Y, and Z, and,
I'm keen to see what the consultation brings forward.
And of course, yet again, we're surrounded by purple. I mean, just anyway.
Benefit infrastructure. Would it support investment into further tourism? So I'm keen to see what the consultation brings forward, and my colleagues in the Fries and Galloway Council are keen also to make sure that anything that's taken forward is evidence based.
So no.
And by the way, remember, evidence based. It's not about your thoughts as a taxpayer, a forced taxpayer. Yeah, it's what various think tanks and blah 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 who can massage figures galore. But look around you. Are we becoming more vibrant and successful? No. It's part of the destruction.
Made up yet? Wait to see what the consultation comes back with.
Yeah, I haven't made up my mind yet because I can see some pros and cons. So I'm keen to see what is out there, what's going on, because I know that there's been support in Edinburgh, for instance, but Dumfries and Galloway have delayed bringing it forward. So consultation, I think, is the right thing to do if they can make sure that we can iron out some of the questions that have been raised.
Ultimately, it still goes ahead. The witchcraft of the hijacking of the word or phrase consultation. Yeah. It's absolutely the Delphi technique. Giving people the illusion, because they have them dotted about the audience, they have, whatever, whoever turns up to these consultations that's selling you this has slept and rested well. Most people who turn up that are unaware about what they're being exposed to are usually, they've worked a hard day, whatever else, they're fairly tired, they're not seeing around them, they certainly don't realise that they've got dotted in amongst that room. Well, activists to guide and help, and if anybody has a thought or two that's, a bit obvious, like, has anybody looked at this? They'll have them piping up and shutting you down and all the rest of it, but ultimately, it still carries on the goals and the outcome.
Nelson, where do you stand on these proposals?
Well, first I've got to say the Scottish Conservatives voted against the visitor levy when it was here in Holyrood, but it's very much up to the local authorities to make the decision on whether they take it forward. We've got to remember that there's different tourist pressures in different parts of Scotland, and I think that the bill, as it passed through Parliament, focused much on the likes of Edinburgh. We've got to remember that during the festival and Oasis concert, Edinburgh is the most expensive place in the whole world to stay, and that doesn't apply to other areas like Dumfries and Galloway. So yeah, there needs to be a huge amount of work to be done to look at what the pros and cons would be. A visitor levy might be appropriate in the summer, but Dumfries and Galloway depends in the future to look to be all seasons. So perhaps we...
So think about the digital ID, cashless society, and 24/7 surveillance. They know where you are every second of the day. So he's basically saying, oh, I'm against this, but maybe we could just bring it in in the winter, etc. He goes on to say. But it's still pushing, it's still carrying it forward on what you perceive it as, on the surface, two different parties. But ultimately, it's the uniparty and the underling occultists.
We need to be able to have the flexibility not to have a visitor levy in the winter. Also got to look at other areas in the world that have visitor levies and compare the costs. We've got to again remember that the VAT...
But remember, all these other and ever-growing levies all around the world is based around United Nations policy. Yeah? The one world government. Seriously, these are well-paid underling occultist puppets. Do you know that for sure, Scott? I would say there's a bloody good chance that he and she has done the funny handshake somewhere. Eastern Star, I'm not saying she is. I'm not saying he's amazing. But statistically, when you come to politicians, they have to be bloody well networked. Seriously. Absolutely.
In Scotland is at 20%, whereas an average around the rest of the world for hospitality and so on, it's closer to 9 or 10. So we need to take all that into consideration. What we mustn't do is put extra burden on bed and breakfast.
There is no way that you can cut this, that it's not going to be an added burden to B&Bs, pubs, hotels, you name it, anything with accommodation. Yeah? But I see I'm at nearly 22 minutes, and if you've been with me so far on this one, thank you very much. As always, I could do a better job, but, I mean... all of these underling occultists want to play their part, as they play music. Many of them play musical chairs themselves in this occult ideology. Because remember, with more and more with the rollout of AI and with the dumbing down of the population where it is and where it's going, yeah, they can be replaced by an AI figure with people with low attention spans and all the rest of it saying, you know, that's the individual I trust. They won't care over time if it's not flesh and blood. The level of insanity ongoing of where we are and where we're going. And yet most of the alternative media... and I'm struggling to remember anybody current, in all honesty. Past-wise, plenty. Current, I'm really struggling. But the alternative media, what we have for it now, unless they're talking about the occultists and the networks and the 10%ers and theosophy, humanism, the New Age, Eastern Star, you name it. OTO. I mean, it's an endless shit show list. And unless anybody's talking about that, they're just waffling, seriously. Or they're just there to, well, keep you distracted. And I'll speak to you soon.